What's up, y'all? Welcome on into the GoVols247 Podcast. Wes Rucker coming to you from Fort Rucker Studio here on a Thursday afternoon of Mike Keith morning here in God's own Knoxville, Tennessee. How are you? I hope you're well. Hope everything in your life is going all right. I hope if you live anywhere in this state that you have gone now or will soon go to pick up your milk sandwiches at the grocery store with everything coming in with the weather. Certainly, the forecast changes a lot. I haven't looked at it in the past hour or so, but I think it's still supposed to be maybe up to 6 inches, a little bit more in snow, at least in this part of the state. So, I hit the intro thing again. That's my bad. Just getting prepared for the milk sandwiches, really. Chase McGrath is getting ready for the milk sandwiches. That's what we're talking about here. But we got a lot to discuss about Mike Keith, which should be announced here in the next little bit, that he is going to be the voice of the Volunteers with Bob Kessling stepping down. Mike Keith is coming home. Sack! That is coming. I don't know if that particular thing is coming to Knoxville, but
it needs to.
It needs to. And but we got to talk a little bit about that. Also going to talk a little bit about Tennessee basketball because, that's not as maybe fun to talk about right now, but generally things okay. But it was a bad day down there in Gainesville, no doubt about that. And to talk about all of those things, let's go on over to the unnamed home studio of Ben McKee. Ben, how are you, man?
Doing well. Poor job by us to avoid a bad basketball podcast during the 5 weeks they were ranked number one, to only record 2 mornings after they suffer their first loss of the season. So great job by us, but excited to see how this basketball team responds on Saturday night in Austin at Texas. Excited for a big sports weekend, not just Tennessee sports weekend. Lady Vols are in action tonight against a really good LSU team in Kim Mulkey at the Food City Center. Excited to watch that one. But then we get a playoff football game for the next 5 nights. College tonight and tomorrow, and then the NFL Saturday, Sunday, Monday, including my Steelers against Lamar Jackson. Don't have high hopes, but hey, Lamar can't win in the playoffs. Hopefully that trend continues on Saturday night against Pittsburgh. So I'm doing well. The game the other night was not fun, but I think more of a one-off than anything. It had more to do with Florida than Tennessee, but certainly some concerns moving forward, and it was a bad performance. But I guess we're starting with the Mike Keith stuff first. That's awesome news, and I know Tennessee fans are thrilled to find that out. He was exactly who they wanted from the jump. This was the opposite of a Tennessee coaching search. Tennessee coaching searches never end up with the coach that fans want from the jump. But this search for a new voice of the Vols, it resulted in who Tennessee fans wanted from the jump. And I think who Tennessee wanted from the jump as well. It was just a matter of, what does the position look like? What are the responsibilities? I'm sure maybe money was involved, but Mike Keith has been in Nashville for a long time. I'm sure he will continue to call it home, but Knoxville is also home to Mike Keith, and he's a phenomenal broadcaster. He's an even better person. I won't say that he and I have a great relationship, but we communicate every so often, and he's been super supportive of me as I've come up in this business. He reached out to me several years ago when I was working my way up through the ranks. Not to suggest that I have made it, because I have not, but fresh out of college, closer to college, I should say, and he was just super supportive of me and just always offering words of encouragement. He's a fellow Yankees fan, so I love that about him, of course, but phenomenal person, phenomenal broadcaster, and a home run addition for Tennessee.
Yeah, I've said it. The way I've described it to people before is that Mike Keith is still the kind of guy who sends handwritten Christmas cards, like, and also just like notes, like he sends letters. Like, actually, like you'll occasionally from the mailbox, like you'll see like a handwritten letter from Mike Keith. Like, he's that kind of a guy, kind of a throwback in a lot of ways. And if things had maybe gone a different way earlier, this is something that he could have been to earlier, I suppose, but Bob had the job. Everybody loves Bob. Mike, took the thing in Nashville, and there was, some people were thinking about, well, he's he's been there for a while. Would he come back now? They got the new stadium coming in there. Would he want to be a part of that? There's all sorts of things that go into that decision. But this is, you say Nashville's been home to him for a while, and it has been. He also considers Knoxville part of his home. I spent years living here. Children went to the University of Tennessee. This is, this is a special place for him, and I think this is something that he's wanted, at least had in the back of his mind for a long time. And also, I mean, because it's Mike Heath, I think people think there's already a tie there, but I still think there's something to people in broadcasting. There are jobs and then there are jobs, right? Like, and if you are a voice of one of the 32 NFL teams, you've got one of the jobs that a lot of people in this business, that is their dream to end up at, is the voice of one of the 32 NFL teams in the biggest sport, in the biggest league in the world, biggest American sport. That is like a job, man. That's like a job. And to get somebody to like willingly walk away from that not a lot of places that could make that happen. And I think that's something that people maybe around the country might be like, oh, he's doing that? Really? But again, I think that shows you what kind of a place Tennessee is.
Yeah. And I really don't mean to kick the Titans while they are down. This may be the loss that hurts them, their fans, the most this all season, quite frankly, or hurts them worse than the reality that they're stuck with the same owner who makes awful decision after awful decision and maybe retained a head coach that they didn't want to retain. I don't mean to kick them while they're down, but Tennessee football, the Volunteers, are the most popular team in the state. Yes. More popular than the Titans, and of course more popular than the Preds, than the Grizzlies. They are the state university, right? It's a football school first and foremost. So the Vols are that's the premier team in the state, and obviously Mike went to school here and loves the Vols, Vol fan, and I'm sure I feel for him because I even though the Titans are going through it right now, like that's going to be a big part of his life. And
only voice they've ever had, right?
Yes, but even for him, the relationships that he's made, just watching from afar, it seems like the Titans radio booth is really, really close. All the different personalities in there. Yes, it's in a sense, it's a no-brainer to come back home, I would imagine. Like I have not spoken to Mike about it, but just from the outside looking in, I would imagine there was great fondness to come back. But I imagine it was still, even if it was maybe an easy decision in a sense, I imagine it was also really hard because of what you were leaving behind, a huge part of your life and a lot of people that you love dearly, a city that I'm sure he loves dearly. And, again, most importantly, the people that you work with on a daily basis. So I feel for Mike because I'm sure this was a tough move for him, even if it's one that he's looking forward to. And I'm excited to hear him call some games. It won't be just football; it'll be basketball as well. And fans will certainly be excited to hear that voice as Bob Kesling rides off into the sunset of retirement.
Yeah, I think that in terms of, be interesting to hear him do basketball games because he hasn't. I don't know if he's ever done them. I'm sure that he obviously knows the sport. He watches a lot of Tennessee basketball, but I think that'll be fascinating to see because I've always said that I think Bob does fine on football. I like Bob on basketball. I think Bob and that crew on basketball are objectively good. Like they're very good at it, I think. And so, that'll be interesting to see how Mike does with all that. I'm sure he'll do fine. He's Mike Keith, but it's to me, I've always said this with the Titans. I think for a lot of people in this state, and there's a lot of people in this state, and a lot of people have a lot of different thoughts. To me, the Titans have for the most part, with the most people, been the team that they watch after they watch the team they really love on Saturday. And there are some people, maybe younger people who have grown up in Nashville who may be more NFL centric, and that's fine. It's the highest level of the sport. I mean, I get it, but it's mostly, not mostly, but more Tennessee fans or Vols fans than anybody else. But you've also got, pocket of Andy fans there. You've got Bama, Auburn, Georgia, Kentucky. They're all kind of right around there. Tennessee, it's an orange town, but there are other people in there, obviously. And so, but I think the Titans are kind of that team that, like, you hope, like, you're kind of chilling after a long Saturday and you're kind of watching the Titans at home a lot of times, or that's kind of like, that's the vibe that I've always gotten. And I know that I live on this part of the state, but I got family there too, and I understand a lot of them, including some season ticket holders for the Titans. And it's just different in terms of the vibe, in terms of the real care level of all that. Like, the college football is just in the blood in this state, and I think that's just a big deal. So, yeah, I think this is good news for Tennessee. Obviously, you've got the multi-time, like, and voice of the NFL of the year guy. I don't know, I forget what they call that actual award, but like NFL broadcaster of the year. I mean, you're talking about a true heavyweight, like, around the country. People know that guy. They know his voice, at least, because it's played on Sports Center a bunch. It's played on, when back when the Titans were, somewhat relevant and would be on there more than 30 seconds. They people know the guy, and people around the business certainly know the guy. And this is a big deal for Tennessee, and I think a really, really cool thing, Ben. I just think this is what, kind of been a dream of Mike's, which I'm sure he'll allude to publicly at some point. It's something that Tennessee fans wanted. It's something the Tennessee administration wanted. It's just rare that you make a hire that, like, you alluded to this earlier, Ben. It's rare to get a hire where everybody involved is thrilled with it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this is. I mean, we talk about home run hires and sports, and obviously this is sports. I think people know what I mean regarding coaches. We talk about home run hires, and this is every bit of a home run hire as well. So I'm excited to have Mike in Knoxville and be around him more. Like I said earlier, we communicate every now and then, and he's been very gracious to me and very supportive as well. So excited to be around him in person, and excited for Tennessee fans as well, because I know that he's going to create a lot of memories for Tennessee fans. And what a great time for Mike Keith to jump on board, because you have football and basketball doing
that front running Mike Keith. What a front runner.
Yeah, front running Mike Keith. I mean, it's a great time. You have John Wilkerson over in baseball. Nothing ever needs to change there until John decides to hang it up one day. So you have, I mean, just think of in recent history, how many soundtracks has John Wilkerson created the last 5 years that Tennessee fans will live forever? And after John passes one day, those clips, how long are those going to live on? Even when, like, people like myself who were around and yourself have passed, like those, the point that I'm getting to, I think you all can tell, is that, like, John has created memories that are going to last long after we live. That's how special they are, is what I'm trying to state. And Mike's going to do the same with football and basketball, because football and basketball, it's a great time to support those programs at the moment as well.
Yeah, it is. And as I'm we'll show you how the sausage is made, Ben. Anything else you want to say while I'm putting this on Facebook here, to make sure that we've got it to all of our social channels?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make sure I'll go ahead and transition us over to the basketball game on Tuesday night. That was absolutely dreadful. Just a really frustrating night for Tennessee. I don't think we're surprised that Tennessee lost. And I said earlier, I do believe that the loss had more to do with Florida than it does Tennessee. There are some concerns going forward that I have that we can talk about in the second segment, but just in terms of general thoughts on the loss and why it happened, aside from the concerns moving forward, in my opinion, Wes, and I've shared this before, and I am essentially brushing off the loss. And just because I'm brushing off the loss and kind of crumbling up the paper and throwing it away or throwing it out the window, that doesn't mean that I'm saying that the loss is okay. It's not. It was an ugly performance. It was a poor performance. It's inexcusable. I don't have any long-term red flags, but there are some concerns. Maybe I'm starting to dig the hole in the ground to plant the red flag, but I'm not quite there yet. I want to see how this team plays over the next couple of games before we reach that point. But I've said before, and this has been my mindset. If you read the story I wrote on Wednesday on the board, my thoughts the morning after, is that it was more basketball than anything to me, in the sense of you're going to have a handful of games each year to where you can't make a shot, and you're going to have a handful of games each year to where you can't miss. It's the nature of basketball because of how fickle shooting is. Every team in the country is going to go through it at one point in time or another. Auburn is going to go through it. Auburn looks like Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors in its prime, but they are even going to go through tough nights to where they can't score the basketball either, because it's just the nature of the sport, in my opinion. So that's what I chalk it up to, because, I mean, Chaz comes out and he misses, 4 or 5 straight shots. The very first shot of the game was as wide open as can be.
Two of those first 3 that he missed were just, like more open than he ever gets.
And you're going to tell me you don't want the best shooter in college basketball? That is my opinion, but that opinion is also backed up by stats, at least going into that particular game. You're going to tell me you don't want the best shooter in college basketball taking those shots? Like, they were beautifully drawn up plays. The players executed it. The shot just didn't go in. And I feel like it just kind of spiraled from there. Chaz misses the first 4 or 5. Then other teammates start missing shots. The defense was actually playing well to start the game. That's an explosive Florida offense.
Yeah, it was.
And they only had 12 points at the 10-minute mark. 12 points in 10 minutes against that Florida offense is pretty good defense in my mind. And I thought they were rebounding the ball decently as well. But as they continued to make shots, they fell into that old habit of poor offense affecting the defense, affecting the rebounding. And when the defense and the rebounding began to slip because they weren't making shots, that's when Florida ran them out the gym. So I do have my concerns, but just in terms of why it happened, they didn't make shots early on, and I think it got to them mentally, which is you don't want to see, right? I'm not excusing it. That is a bad thing to see. You don't want to see old habits pop up, Wes, and not only just allowing the defense and rebounding to slip. I also felt at times they were standing around watching Chaz too much, like they did with Dalton at times last year. So that's why I think they reached the point of that loss in which they did.
Yeah, I think, to me, this gets down to a couple of things. One, how much different is a let's see here. How much different is a 10-point loss than a 30-point loss? Like how much really different is it? Like, we all can tell that, like, there's a difference between like a buzzer beater and like a 30-point loss. Those are different things. But in terms of like a 10-point loss and a 30-point loss, how much different is that? You know, how much different are those things? Because neither one of them you were really that competitive. It's just, the question that I have is, I don't know if you want to call it a problem. It is a question. Why, when Tennessee goes cold, does it go polar? That is like, that's my question. Is that, what is it about I mean, listen, every team is its own thing, but you go back and look at these Barnes teams during the year, and once, twice a year, you'll see something just so disgusting. And when those games come, people know that they're there, and they are unavoidable. And so the lack of any sort of adjustment that really seems to be made during those games is it's a concern, because I understand why you still want to keep taking the shots you normally take. And I know Rick's big on that, right? Like as he should be. Take the shots that you practice, take the shots that you know you have a high percentage of making normally. But when that doesn't happen, like they're not changing things to force the ball to the rim more. They're not, making a tweak here or there. That's one small concern, because again, the difference in a 10-point loss and a 30-point loss, whatever, they both suck. But
can I stop you on that one and ask you a question?
Yes.
With the adjustments, because you're right in what you're saying, and I agree with you. And that was my thought during the game. I know Jimmy Dykes said it a million times as well. Like, you're not making shots, and even if you're a good shooter, you need to quit trying to fit a square peg into a round hole and try to get to the basket and draw a foul and get to the free throw line. Like, you need to change it up in that sense. I guess I don't even know that I'm asking you a question as much adding a thought to what you said, because I do want to be careful about the whole adjustments thing.
Yes,
because they win a lot more games than they lose. And you don't win a lot more games than you lose without being aggressive. I mean, without making adjustments.
Without tweaking things. Yeah.
Without tweaking things. I mean, just last game against Arkansas, remember Bishop Boswell checks in and he turned it over. He was credited for the turnover, but I don't know that Felix Akpar, he was trying to feed it and dump it down into Felix on the block. And I don't think Felix had great positioning or was, I think he was kind of sitting back in a stance too much, to where he was stumbling in a sense trying to get to the basketball. It wasn't the pass from Bishop was bad, is that Felix had not positioned himself well to receive the pass. And Rick talked about that after the game, the Arkansas game, of like, we put Bishop in there, he turned it over, and I don't even think the turnover is much his fault. It's on my fault because I was wanting to get it into Felix too much. So they do make those adjustments. I think it's maybe heightened in a loss like that because absolutely nothing was going right.
Yeah, I think that also these issues like this specifically with Connect didn't happen very often, because they did happen occasionally, but Connect's ability to put the ball on the floor and just go over people, that really was like a difference for Tennessee. Like he was just kind of an easy button there at times when it was like, okay, go do this. Okay, go do that. Whereas Lanier still is more of someone who's getting his shots set up for him at this point, and maybe that'll change at some point, but that seems to be what's going on a lot there. And when you don't have that, the issue is, like, there are times where, Ziegler can change a lot of things. He does so many things on both ends of the floor. At the end of the day, he can't not be 5'8" or 5'9". And there are times where he will have done everything right. He will have wiggled his way in there and gotten in there to make a play. But like there's like a monster like Florida has in the middle who's just going to go gobble up a shot anyway. And that's, those kinds of things happen. But that my first point was about the offense was, okay, you get a pass. Like, it was bad, but I think basketball being the way it is, I give everybody just about everybody one pass anyway. I'm like, okay, there's maybe two tops, but like, it's a long season. You're gonna have a couple of these. The SEC is brutal. But what bothered me a lot was the way they sat there and took it. That part I didn't like, because I'm not saying that you need to go fight somebody. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is Florida enjoyed every bit of that. Florida was mocking you for a while, like just stunting on you, pushing you, being really physical with you, running their mouth at you, winning 50-50 balls, throwing some shots here and there that probably on another day would have been called. And Tennessee just sat there and took it. And I did not like that at all. Now, I'm not saying that you start a brawl and get in a fight, but I'm saying, would a playoff foul here or there not have been wrong? What I did like was that a couple times Lanier tried to go force a dunk just to change the game. And even though they didn't work, I loved it.
And try to get to the free throw line as well.
Yes. I mean, and he's trying to make something happen, trying to quiet the crowd, trying to get to the line. Those are good things. But when you have guys like Ziegler and Meshack and Cade Phillips, even though he's kind of out there on one shoulder for the time being, and he was in foul trouble when he got out there because of a bad call. But like, it's. I just would like to think. I mean, if you go back and look at the photo gallery of that game, you see, big man for Florida, number 9, just taunting Lanier after blocking his shot.
He was doing too much.
You see 15,
that was excessive.
15 also was doing stuff like you had a really hard foul with Lanier getting raked across the neck. You had a lot of things in that game. You had the coach doing the Gator chomp. Like you had a lot of stuff going on during the game that I thought, surely Zakai's going to do something. Surely somebody's going to step up and do something. Now, I get if you say, hey, let the scoreboard do the talk and all that, to the victor go the spoils. But I just did not like Tennessee's reaction to being punked. And it got punked. It got punked on the scoreboard. It got punked with the mouth. It got in every way. And I understand that when you get a beat down, you just get a beat down. You just got to take it. But I didn't like the physical, the way that Tennessee kind of physically backed down a little bit. And I didn't like that.
A couple of questions, because I can't deny that they didn't get punked. That they did, right? Do you think that they played with effort?
I don't think they played without effort. I don't think.
Did they play with effort? Yes or no?
Did they play with their normal level of effort? No, but they played with effort. Like they did, because normally Tennessee plays really, really, really hard.
I think Tennessee did play really, really hard. I think that was evident in how they were diving on the floor for loose balls repeatedly. They were contesting shots at the rim, whether it be Felix Okpara, Cade Phillips, others. They weren't shying away from contact defensively, whether at the rim or trying to defend their man. They were chasing loose balls in terms of the rebounds. They were going after the rebounds. It's just the ball didn't bounce their way. So I know for the fan on social media, that was an easy go-to gripe was, oh, they're not playing with effort. I don't think that could be further from the truth. They played with effort. I saw them diving on the floor for loose balls time and time and time again. If they weren't playing with effort, they're not doing that. And they're not doing the other things defensively that I mentioned as well. They didn't play well, and they didn't play smart at times either. But the effort and the want to was there. That is not of any question
even
to me.
Even with rebound numbers?
Well, the rebound numbers are going to look like that when you make 12 shots in a game. Like did Florida out rebound Tennessee? Of course. Was Florida the better rebounding team? Yes. Were they drastically a better rebounding team? No. I think those numbers are inflated because of how many missed shots Tennessee had. I don't think Florida did to Tennessee what Tennessee did to Arkansas this past Saturday. I think those are two different things, though the numbers look the same. Which leaves me, because and when I say this, I'm not disagreeing with you, but what you're saying in terms of like taking it, that to me comes off as not giving effort. Like to me, you take it when you don't get effort. I think Florida is a more physical team than Tennessee, and I think it's because they were outmanned. I think Tennessee was outmanned against Florida, and that's not at all excusing what took place. Like, you should have been better. You should have tried to be more physical, even if I do think you were being physical and you were playing with effort. You should have given more. That was kind of my takeaway is that Tennessee was outmanned, because Tennessee doesn't have anybody that can handle Big Ruben from Nigeria the sophomore center that transferred in from Washington State. That guy that can maybe handle him is on the bench, JP Estrella. That was the first game when Tennessee really missed JP Estrella, in my opinion, because JP is 255 according to the roster, and Ruben is 260. I think he was.
I'm gonna look him up right now. He's got to be at least 255 or 260.
He's 260. He's listed at 260 because I wrote about this going into the game because it was a big concern of mine. Like, how is Tennessee going to handle the physical strength? I know they can handle the wiry guys like Jonas Adu, but I don't know that they can handle the big, powerful guys like Ruben Chanelu. I keep calling him Ruben because obviously I can't pronounce his last name. But Felix Akpara is 235. Cade Phillips is 215. Igor is 225, 230. Like, they're giving up 30 to 40 pounds on him. To me, like, what he was doing was more about what Tennessee was lacking rather than Tennessee just taking it. Although they could have played with more physicality, if that makes sense to you.
It does. And I want to pick this conversation right back up where we are now. But since we're overdue for a break, I want to step away and get to that before we pick back up this conversation, whichever way you want to say this. I'll figure that out, what's going on. And I'll see if I can get the hamsters twirling around in this head during the commercial break. But I want to pick this right back up where we were, and we'll do that after taking a break, listen to some products, services, in-house ads, etc., and come right back here on the GoVols247 Podcast. #ad. Welcome back to the GoVols247 Podcast, brought to you by whatever product, services, and in-house ads you just heard a moment ago during that commercial break. Wes Rucker still coming to you from Fort Rucker Studio. Ben McKee still coming to you from his home studio here on Mike Keith Thursday morning in God's own Knoxville, Tennessee. Still hope you're doing well. Still hope everything in your life is good. Still hope that you are going to get your milk sandwiches at the store, but not the particular one that I'm going to go to here in a little bit, because I don't want there to be a huge line there, because that's not enjoyable for me. But we got a lot more Tennessee basketball to discuss here on this podcast, and we'll do that after just a quick request from our end. Please go in there and take a minute out of your day and rate and review and subscribe to this podcast. Listen, wherever you can cast the Find Pod, you can find this podcast. Every single service that every reputable service that releases podcasts, the CBS Sports Network gets ours out to. So please, you get it everywhere, and you can get it for free, and we do it for free. We're happy to do it for free. But since we're doing it for free and we want to keep doing it for free, I don't think it's too much to ask to please rate, please review, please leave a fresh review. That helps tremendously. Also, please keep telling people that you know. I whether it's on YouTube or Facebook or the streaming services, wherever it is, I love hearing from people, and I still do almost every week, sometimes multiple times during the week. At games or different places, people will come up and say, "Hey, I've heard the podcast through this or through that," or, "Hey, I just told this guy about the podcast." I love that stuff. I love hearing the random places. So please, if you're already doing all that stuff, keep doing it. We love you. And if not,
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Straight back into it, Ben, with the basketball talk on the big man. I think there was hope with Tennessee that Okpara would be more consistently physically able to go toe-to-toe with some of those big men. Not like he's not 260 pounds, right? He's he's somewhere in between Adu and Big Nine at Florida and Edey. Like, he's somewhere in the middle of those things. And I think there was hope that he would be able to do that, because if you look at some of his tape against Edey, he did okay. And I think he was active in that game. I thought
he played well. Honestly,
I think he did some good things. He
was one player that I had positive thoughts on after the game. he was.
Yeah, he may have been the one. But it's just a little bit, it can be kind of a bit of a bummer, because when you think that Tennessee has addressed something that was a huge issue toward the end of last season, and you saw how painful that was, and how, man, just one more big body to maybe throw at that guy could have changed that game, could have changed that. You know, you could be in the Final Four, you could be playing UConn for a national championship, yada, yada, yada. But it didn't happen. And then you think 1 year later, okay, well, Adu goes to Arkansas, and then you bring in a guy who's a little bigger, just a little thicker, a little more physically willing to go in there and do some stuff. And then one game after, you just take Adu's team and you just spank it right on the bottom by being more physical. You go on the road, and then this happens. I think that combination of things makes it a bummer because if you're a Tennessee fan, you just keep thinking, you know, you've been thinking, whoa, look at that. Look how much better Tennessee is than Arkansas right now. Look how much better without Jonas in there, they can just bully people around. And then what's this? Florida got a big guy. We don't care. Look what we just did. And then you go, oh, and for that to still be an issue, because it's different. Like Janai Broom's a different kind of player. Like he's one that
nobody in the country stopping him.
Well, nobody's in the country stopping him. But what I'm saying is, in terms of the pure physicality, like the size, you know, he's crafty and he's going to do what he does because he's so good with that left hand and he gets that shot off no matter what.
He's not uber athletic.
Yeah, like it's not like he is just physically dominant, imposing, and so that's a good thing. There's still not a lot of guys quite like some of the biggest of the big, but Tennessee still is not there yet. And Barnes talked about this at the end of last season. If you remember him talking about this, about how maybe college basketball in some ways was going back to at least one big tree if you've got one, and then you can blend the new wave, you know, kind of spaced out stuff with still having a true big 260, 280 pound dude in the middle. And he didn't go get one of those guys. He upgraded a little bit in terms of the weight, but it's not his fault that Estrella got hurt. He's maybe the closest thing, but
he is the thing.
Yeah,
they didn't go get one because they had one. They were very confident in JP Estrella, not being Zach Edey, of course, but being a 5 and being able to do exactly what you just said, playing the new age small ball stuff around JP, and that it was going to be JP and Felix manning that 5 spot, and Chaz and Igor and Zakai and Jemai and Gainey and the rest playing around them, and D Stone, and unfortunately didn't work out. He has a stress fracture in his foot over the summer. It doesn't heal the way that they thought it would, in terms of trying to avoid surgery.
That's a lot of weight on a small bone.
It is. And I'm not at every practice, but even in the off season, we get to attend at least a couple. And when I was there, he was off of it. He was working on the other side with Garrett Medenwald, the strength coach, and staying off of it. It's not like he was still going 90-0 in 5-on-5. They were being very cautious, and it just did not heal. So it's bad luck is what it is, unfortunately, because JP Estrella is what this team needs. And it wasn't because they didn't go out and get somebody that they needed. They didn't go get one because they were very confident in JP. I don't think people realize maybe how or what Tennessee has in JP. I mean, JP's a kid that legitimately picked Tennessee over Duke. Mm-hmm. Legitimately picked Tennessee over Duke. And in Iowa as well, after Iowa had just had Luka Garza, mm-hmm. the big man. Iowa can develop some big men as well, and Tennessee picked him over both. I mean, he's a top 50, top 70 player who could have gone to a lot of places, maybe even a fringe 5-star at one point, if I remember correctly. He's very talented, and just his hands are terrific. Yeah. And that's exactly what Tennessee needs. I'm not saying that
he's still making threes from his scooter.
Right. I mean, he's somebody that they thought was going to have a big year. They really did, and that's what this team was missing on Tuesday night. I'm not saying that was the reason they got blown out by 30, but they couldn't. JP would have helped contain Florida's big man. I truly do believe that, because it's not Felix's body type. Now the good news is and Rick talked about it a million times last year when Jonas would also struggle with the imposing big men, the more physical big men, is that there are things that you can do to where your length can give the physicality issues. Now it's about allowing and helping Felix get to that point, and Cade to a certain extent as well. They've got to coach him up and get him to that point, because you're going to be real nervous if you run into that type of big man in the NCAA tournament. Well, what is the NCAA tournament? It's a matchups game, a matchups tournament, and you don't want to run into that type of matchup without having Felix more prepared to deal with that level of physicality. So all hope is not lost, because obviously you can't pick up a trade deadline acquisition to help you in that area. But maybe as Felix continues to settle in more to his new program and the system, and you're able to coach him up more, maybe he adjusts better as the season moves along. But that I mentioned earlier that for the most part, I am throwing that game out of the window as a one-off at the moment. Maybe we'll revisit that here in a couple of weeks if they play poorly. But for now, I think it's fair to view it as somewhat of a one-off. And although I do mostly have that mindset towards the Florida game, I mentioned earlier, I do have concerns, and that is like my biggest concern now. I'm not quite ready to plant a red flag, because there aren't a ton of physically imposing big men anymore. They're more rare than not. And I do like that. Jonas was timid in those situations.
Yes.
Felix is not timid. Felix was ready for the moment. He played hard. It's just he was kind of beat at birth. It's kind of the way I look at it. So hopefully they can get that a little bit corrected. But that is my big concern moving forward with this team. Anytime they run into a big physical imposing post player, it's going to be a huge concern for me.
Yeah, that brings me back to one of the many classic Derek Dooley quotes about when was that battle lost? At conception. I mean that but I mean you can do things. Barnes always talks about getting there early, which is important. Do your work early. That
The
means
arm bar,
run the floor, get down there, get on the block, do not let him get ahead of steam. Do not let him catch the ball with space to then come downhill on you. You have, there are things you can do. And I will say this too. I noticed, I think it was a couple weeks ago, and then even more so the next week, Barnes has been pushing Akpar quite a bit in practice lately. And I think, and especially going into SEC play, he's really, really, really been on. I mean, it's been like there have been a few days lately where it's been Felix Day. Now I imagine in the aftermath of last game, it's been everybody's day the past couple days. But Akpara there were days where it was like, you just have days. You know what I'm talking about, Ben. People who've not covered or have not seen a Rick Barnes practice. Sometimes it's just like one or two guys and it's just their day. Whatever's going on, it's their day. They are taking the business for 2+ hours. And Akpar has been getting it. And the reason Rick does that is, one, sometimes he just randomly picks somebody. I don't care and he's admitted to this before, but he'll never say it on the record. The other thing, though, is that it's a certain guy for a certain time. Like, I need you now, big fella, and I'm going to be in your backside until you get there. And basically that's what he's saying. I'm going to have my foot in your backside until you do what I need you to do. And it can be a bummer, but he's doing it for a reason. And that's what it is. I just wonder now, like, how Tennessee's not going to face a lot of these guys, Ben, but it is going to face some of these guys. These guys do exist. They're not just, Big Rubes is not the only one of these guys in the league. He's not the only one in college basketball. What if they had like faced Kalkbrenner again or somebody like that, down the stretch, they in the tournament. There's these guys are out there. So Tennessee, that's where I start to worry. Like, you need Felix to get better. You're going to have to get more from Milicic in that way, because he is a great rebounder, an elite rebounder. And some reason why Okpara doesn't have more rebounds, he doesn't play as many minutes, but also he does the thing. Tennessee's done this a lot where other guys shield and they have a main rebounder. That's just how kind of things work. Like other guys get bodies on a body, and this guy goes and gets the ball. And that's a strategy. Tennessee, I've seen lots of teams do this. So that's good, but he has to help more physically on defense at times. And they just have to build walls. They got to build walls. They got to do it as a team. They are going to give up some threes. When you do this, you're going to give up open threes occasionally, but that's what you're going to have, the trade you're going to have to take, because you just can't let some of that physical stuff, be an impediment. Like Tennessee is an older team. Tennessee has got some experience. Tennessee's got some guys. They really need Dubar to get in there too, because he's not like an elite, explosive, twitchy leaper or anything like that, but he is a big, strong, grown man, and they need him to get in there and mix it up too. They're going to have to get him going in that way, because Ben, I think he's a guy who physically, he's not as twitchy as Josiah Jordan James, but he's got that kind of body, and they're going to have to get more from him, I think, to help there.
Yeah, I agree. That is the one concern that I have with this team, as I've mentioned, is I like Jonas Adu. I like Felix Okpara and Cade Phillips and Igor, but they don't have that one physical and imposing big man, and not that was necessarily JP's game. I know I went on and on about JP.
It's a component of his game,
but right. But he's not going to lean on anybody. He's just a bigger body is what he is. He can hold his own more because he has more weight on his frame. So that is a concern moving forward, and it's why even when Tennessee was ranked number 1, you saw people talking up other teams as being better than Tennessee, and why people still favored Auburn is because Tennessee obviously has a great roster. It still has a great chance of doing great things, but the roster isn't as well-rounded as in Alabama, as in Auburn. I think Florida's roster is more well-rounded than Tennessee's. Like I said, I think the other night had more to do with Florida than it did Tennessee, quite frankly. And like I hear you about, Tennessee did kind of sit there and take it. Like I'm not saying that they didn't, but I also do think they were outmanned more than, especially in the post. I think they were outmanned more than it was them just sitting there taking it. At least that's my thought on it. Maybe I look silly for saying that here in a couple of weeks. But one last thing I wanted to point out in terms of kind of the roster things and the point that I was getting to about other teams being talked about as the best team in the country while Tennessee was ranked number 1. Evan Maya does a great job of efficiency rating things in addition to KenPom. Everybody talks about KenPom, and there are a million different resources you can
Torvik,
use.
there's a bunch of
there's a bunch of them. evanmaya.com is kind of one of the new ones. And Evan yesterday mapped out on a chart the current college basketball team efficiency landscape based on predicted team efficiency going forward. He separated them into 4 tiers. And on this graph, I'll retweet it so it's on my timeline, or you can just go to Evan's Twitter. His last name is Miyakawa, I believe, Miyakawa. He does great work, and he's kind of newer, and I've been following him since the start, and he's starting to blow up, which has been cool to see. But he put the teams in terms of projected efficiency into 4 tiers: title favorites, Final Four potential, hit or miss, happy to be here, and then the rest. The title favorites that he has based on his predicted team efficiencies: Auburn, Duke, Iowa State, Houston, Florida, Alabama, Gonzaga. Those are his title favorites, most likely to win the whole thing. Tennessee is in the Final Four potential, and he actually has Tennessee as the team with the most Final Four potential. So essentially in that Tier 2 range with Kansas, Marquette, Mississippi State, Texas Tech, Illinois, Arizona, Marquette, Texas A&M. So, and I think that accurately sums up what this year's Tennessee team is. They don't have a flawless roster put together like Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Duke, maybe even Iowa State, Gonzaga, Houston. I was surprised to see Gonzaga and Houston in there with the title favorites.
I was surprised a little bit with Gonzaga, not with Houston. I've seen that team a couple. I think Houston and Iowa State are both wagons, I think.
Yes, and look, Florida's in there as well. Speaking to my point about, I think that had more to do with Florida than anything. But I think that it's not to be negative, but I think it's unlikely Tennessee wins the national championship. But I think the Final Four potential, talented enough to make a deep run when playing well, is how he describes it. I think that perfectly describes this Tennessee team. Mm-hmm. It's a roster that, because of the situation we're talking about in the post, that it may limit the ceiling of this team, because the tournament, you have to win 6 straight. And depending on who you're matched up with, the issues in the post that we're talking about, the lack of a more physical body could limit them. And it also, like, yeah, you'd prefer to be in the tier 1 title favorite, whatnot, but being the top team in the Final Four potential tier 2 range is not a bad place to be.
Doesn't mean you can't win a national championship. It just means things have to go right for you.
Right. But I guess it also speaks to this team still has Final Four Elite 8 potential. It's just a matter of continuing to get better. It is January 9th. That they can get better even in the post, as we talked about, and it's up to the coaches and the players to do so, which was Rick Barnes' message coming out of the loss in the post game on Tuesday night.
Yeah, last thing I got, because I know, Ben, you got to get out of here, and I got to get this thing edited too. So, but the last couple things, I think it does show you also, you just need Chaz to be Chaz. You just do, like, no pressure, kid, but you need to score 20 probably. That's just kind of how it is. Another thing under the radar, they got to get Gainey going again. It's been a few games where he's not been shooting the ball very well. And look at what he did at Illinois. They don't win that game without him. Look what they did with Gainey when he's hot. Look what they had, Lanier and Ziegler both in foul trouble against the team that I think could sneak its way into that title conversation. 2 lottery picks. Illinois is good. And Gainey went off in that game and they were able to win it. They need him to get going. And the last thing I've got is just, I am a little concerned with the health situation, just because it's a combination of things for me. One, it's early in the season and you've already got like 3 guys in braces basically. And when you've only got 9 scholarship players, that is concerning. To me, it is anyway. And you combine that also with knowing that Lanier has probably never physically been pushed as hard as he's going to be pushed by the consistent type of athletes that are going to be thrown at him. And so when you combine the guys that are already hurt a little bit and playing through stuff with the fact that you got this going on now, at least something to keep an eye on with the way people are being really physical with Lanier. And if he could make sure he doesn't break down. I know he's older, but he hadn't been quite through this in terms of the number of guys twice a week of this size going at him. I'm a little concerned with that because, Meshack clearly is affected right now. He's not comfortable offensively. They got to get that finger right to the best they can. We can all see, Phillips, the shoulder. Hopefully that doesn't linger too long, because a dislocated shoulder, mad props for the toughness, but we'll see how much that affects him. And then obviously Boswell's already got the thing too. So that's where the numbers start to become a bit of a concern for me anyway.
Yeah. The overall, I do think in terms of just the number itself, the 9 number, I think that's being a little bit overblown. 9 players is enough because they essentially play all 9, give or take a little with Bishop, because he's a true freshman. 9 players is plenty in a rotation, yes, especially when they're all capable. Tennessee played more players than Florida did on Tuesday night.
Yeah, Tennessee's the way Tennessee plays defense, so there's going to be some officials where they're going to get a bunch of fouls called, and I think in those games it's going to be hard.
Right, but even over the Rick Barnes era, I mean, how often has he played double-digit guys in a game? I would imagine not very, very often. I mean,
early on he couldn't. He didn't have enough guys, good players to do
it. It's not a thing that really happens in basketball. Most coaches do not play double-digit players in a game.
Yeah, Auburn does. Most don't.
Yeah, but Auburn Auburn's the number one team, the best team in the country.
No, but I'm saying like Bruce likes to play like his 9 or 10 guys or whatever. But yeah,
most coaches do not play double-digit players in a game. So I think the number thing is being a bit overblown at the moment. Where it becomes the issue is if you have a bunch of guys get hurt. And right now, this is a little bit of a banged-up basketball team. If Florida was dealing with the similar situation, there would also be a numbers crunch and a numbers issue there as well. It's just unfortunately the injury bug has bit this team a little bit. Obviously, the long-term injury with JP, okay. Cam quits the team in the middle of the season, Cam Carr, and then now you got little nicks and knacks. Nothing super serious, but things that are bothering players and affecting their play. And that's when it becomes an issue, is when you are having to deal with multiple injuries. And it's unfortunate because Tennessee has been a mostly healthy basketball team the last several years because they have a great strength and conditioning and trainer staff. You're not going to be hard to find a better duo than what Tennessee has. So it's unfortunate, which is why they need to get Darlin Stone Dubar going. He has to be a contributor. He doesn't have to score 20 a game, but he has to be an effective player on the floor. And there's still hope for that. He had the concussion that cost him some time. He had the personal matter to start the year that cost him some time. I still think he's learning in this system, but I think there's also reason for optimism and hope, if you want to view it glass half full, that he can get going because he did miss time early in the season. They got to get him going because if you're going to have the roster that you do at this point in time, he's got to be a contributor. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. And that was my other thought as well. And Gainey, I wrote that yesterday, that they got to find a way to get him going. I think he's 4 of 21 the first 2 games of SEC play. They got to find a way to get him going. When the roster is what we've been talking about, the role players become that much more important because you can tell a difference of when they're on and when they're off.
Yep. And sometimes it's a deal where you don't need 100% from one guy. You need 5% more from everybody, 10% more from everybody. And that's how you do these things. That's how you put them together. But yeah, they're going to have to figure out some things there with Dubar, when to play him, when not to. It's really unfortunate that he couldn't play early in the season because that's when it would have been nice to get him really going. And SEC play is just brutal. There's nowhere to hide. So you have to pick and choose your spots. That's a really tough situation for Barnes and those guys. When to put him in, when not to. When can you trust him? When can you not? That's going to be something they're going to have to deal with. And they're also at times going to have to deal with the fact that on defense, he's not as good as the other guys, and he's still going to have to play. So you got to figure that out, and you have to make some concessions here and there. But I know, Ben, you're overdue slightly for getting out of here, and I got to go ahead and get this thing chopped up and send out to the masses as well before going to purchase those milk sandwiches to get everybody ready for the snow that could be coming. I hope it's not like the last couple of times we've had like almost a foot. Hopefully we don't get anything like that. I don't think it'll be like that, but it has been very, very cold for several days. So whatever hits the ground, it's going to stick. So safe travels, everyone, this weekend in the state. Everyone in Los Angeles. Should have mentioned this off the top. Thinking about y'all. These pictures are just dreadful about what's going on out there. I know there's a lot of Tennessee student athletes, including Jemai Mashak, and Brew McCoy, and Nico Iamaliava, Dean Curley. There's a bunch of them that live out there either in LA County or just outside LA County. Haven't heard anything about anything being in trouble. I know the Mashak family, their stuff seems to be okay right now. I've heard that. So hopefully everything gets somewhat contained out there. That's really scary. And hopefully anybody who's getting buried in the snow here on the eastern part of the country, hope everything turns out okay there. I know up in DC and other places it's been ransacked recently. So hopefully everything's going all right. Hopefully everybody can stay in one piece. And we will have another basketball edition of the podcast. Obviously, there's a lot of this is going to be going forward. Football never sleeps, and baseball coming up pretty soon with baseball.
5 weeks from tomorrow.
I got to get a Diamond Vols podcast intro nailed down. That might be a good snow weekend activity. If I can just have the little kid sit over here to my left and quietly watch whatever he's watching, and not tell me every 30 seconds, hey, Dad, this just happened. Hey, Dad, this happened. then I can put this thing together and we can get it out to you. But Ben, I know you got to go. I got to go too. So thank you for being here, man.
Thanks, Wesley.